Alright guys, today we're going to take a look at yet another bicycle lock. And that's because every time I review a lock, about 10 of you send in emails requesting different models for me to look at. We've all got bikes, none of us want them to get stolen, so let's take a look at this guy. This is the OnGuard 8120 Mastiff chain lock. 4 feet long, very heavy, 1.85 kilograms or 4 pounds, 1 ounce, for the most part, hardened steel. On the brochure, they say they rate this a 70 on a scale of 10 to 100, so that's probably right around the middle. They do not recommend this for motorcycles, but instead say bicycles and light motorized scooters. They are so confident that they offer what they call the anti-theft protection. If you register everything and then your bicycle is later stolen, they'll give you back $1,500. And if you register and your motor scooter or jet ski is later stolen, they only reimburse you $500. I can't explain the $1,000 difference, but that's what they offered. So all I can tell you is keep your receipts. All right, a huge lock. This thing, it looks kind of weird. Let's look at it in 2 phases. Let's first look at the lock, then we're going to look at the chain and try to figure out if one of them is the weak point. Weird looking lock itself. Until you wrap your hand around it, this outer body, this is hard black plastic. On the front, this also is plastic, and then this yellow part is yellow silicone rubber. So when you grip it, it's comfortable to hold, and the silicone kind of sticks to your hand so you don't drop it, even if the whole lock is wet. You've been riding in the rain. The lock itself is a pretty complicated lock. Let's take a look at the keys. You get a total of 5 of them, 4 of these little guys, and a larger one that has a light. So at night, when you're trying to find the hole to the keyway, you have a light to get there with. This is what's called a slider lock. Now, there are a total of 10 sliders. It doesn't matter which way you slide this in, because there's sliders on the left and right, and both sides of this key will engage when it slides in there. One, the upper sliders, and one on the right side sliders. When you slide it in there, I have not been able to pick this, by the way. It is super tough. When you turn the key, you've only got to turn it about 20 degrees or so, like right there, and then you'll get an open. So slide it back in there. And I'm going to show you something else. Let's hang this out like it's on a motorcycle or a bike. When you turn the key, I mean, it really throws that thing out of there. It's like he's got a mouthful of bad crawdads or something. It really slings that shackle out. Yet, when we look in there, I don't see anything. There's nothing to look at. There's no giant spring. There is, however, a metal plate. And when we take the screwdriver and we push that plate down, it takes a lot of pressure to get them to go down. You'll notice that 2 locking bars, these are both hardened steel rollers, pop out and engage in the cutout on the shackle. So very neat. And then, of course, when we turn the key, you'll hear that powerful spring release, and that's what throws out this shackle. So pretty neat device. What I will tell you about this lock, there's a very powerful shutter on it. I have to get a screwdriver, and really it's very strong to keep the debris out of the lock. Very tight keyway, and you can get a tensioner in there. And you can tension it perfectly with this ergonomic handle. You can hold it, it's very comfortable. But it doesn't matter how much pressure you put on this tensioner, not a single one of those 10 sliders binds up. So basically you have to guess at the position of 10 different sliders. Really complicated. As I said, I've never been able to pick this type of lock. So that is not going to be a weakness. Likewise, when we looked inside of here, these steel rollers, you'll notice when they pop out, we try to shove them back in, not going in. These are also not spring-loaded, so that's not going to be an option for us. We've looked at the 2 most popular weaknesses for this lock, and neither one of them are going to allow us to get into the lock itself. All right, before we look at the chain, let's do a little bit of destruction on this guy. I'm going to do it off camera because I don't want to document the removal of my thumb, because this is rounded, it's going to be difficult to hold. So I'm probably going to put him in a vise, and then I'm going to cut him using a razor knife right along the seam there, and then right along the seam there. And then theoretically, we can then peel off this outer housing, find the metal underneath. Maybe we can find a way, like a secret release button or something under there, a roll pin, something that we can take advantage of to exploit this lock and bypass it. So let's try that, and I'll be right back. All right, guys, this was a little bit more of a chore than I thought it was going to be. This is pretty hard plastic, and when you get up here around this lip, it's a little hard to get to work around this shaft of the shackle because it also is covered in plastic. I was able to do it, but again, it took quite a bit longer. This is really hard plastic. Nothing like metal, of course. It's just really awkward to try to cut. When I did cut through there, the front face popped off. This is actually, I thought it was plastic. This is actually some kind of cast aluminum, pot metal of some kind. Not that expensive, doesn't matter, because it's not really providing any security. The only thing it really does is hold this guy, and this is what your shutter lock looks like. So pretty cool. Slide that dude in there. Doesn't provide any security, it's just interesting to see how the things work. When I got to the lock itself, there's a lot of roll pins. There's looks like 4 roll pins on here. So my first idea was to take out this roll pin and this roll pin, but as you look at it for about 10 seconds and you real quick figure out there's a U cut into the shaft of this. So this piece that holds the chain was actually fed in before the lock was installed. Fed in there and then held in place, and then this roll pin and this roll pin were driven in there not to lock them in place, but just to allow them to rotate around. You can neither push them in nor pull them out because of that U-shaped cut in this shaft. So removing these two will not allow you to pull this out. So very well thought out. I gotta say, it's pretty impressive. Now, these other 2 roll pins I thought might be a little bit different. Got one right here, and then on the opposite side, there's one right there. But when you look at the diameter of this roll pin, it isn't a large enough diameter to extend the entire length of this lock. So I was just curious, and I put a needle down in there, and I know you're not going to be able to see it, but when you look in there, you can actually see the bottom of that. It's a blind hole. This roll pin only goes in there a little bit, probably a little bit less than 1/2 of an inch. It does not extend all the way through, so you're not going to be able to drive that all the way through. You're going to have to extract those 2 roll pins in order to pull this lock out to cause the system to fail. Well, of course you can, the first idea is let's try to use an ease out, an extractor. Well, I tried that, and the problem, roll pins are open on one side. So when you take something and you shove it down in there, it forces that open a little bit, which tightens it up inside of the hole. So that's exactly what happened when I shoved the knees out. Let me get I had another one here. It'll be a little bit less awkward to show you. So when you put the ease out in there, it causes that roll pin to expand, tightening his grip on the inside of there, and you're really going to end up breaking your ease out. So pulling that out of there is really not an option. It would be a time-consuming thing to do anyway, to pull both of those things out of there. So I've got to see. I don't think the lock itself is the weakness, if there is a weakness. Let's keep looking. Let's go ahead and take a look at the chain. This is riveted on here so it doesn't fall off. It's sewed, it's pinched. I'm going to have to cut it. I'm going to remove this nylon sheathing, which is designed to protect the bike, obviously, so we can expose the chain. Maybe we can find a weakness there. All right, guys, got that cover off of there. I just razored it off. That was the fastest way to take a look at the underlying chain. Some I like to look at, one of the possible weaknesses are where the chain attaches to the locking mechanism and to the locking pawl itself. In this case, they use roll pins. So the idea would be, of course, to knock those out, but they were smart enough on both of these to use blind holes. So they drove that pin in there, they gave it a couple of extra licks to swell it and to peen over the edge, and that is no longer a weak point. That's actually a pretty strong point. Oh, man. Okay, well, what else are we going to look at? I'm going to have to look at the chain. I took the entire cover off, hoping that they had cheaped out somewhere in the links, but they didn't. They're all identical. They appear to be hardened, but I don't believe a lot of these things that I see anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and attack this in 3 different ways. I'm going to try it with a hacksaw, try it with a pair of bolt cutters, and the nuclear weapon of anti-lock tools. I'm going to use a die grinder and see how quickly we can get through here. For the hacksaw test, I started off with a brand new blade, just took it out of the box. I clamped up the chain inside of my vise. I realized that may not be realistic for someone breaking into, like trying to steal a bike or something, but I really didn't want to try to hold this thing with my hand, even with gloves on. I'm liable to take the tip of my finger off or something. Anyway, you can probably tell from the flexing of that blade, I'm really bearing down on the forward part. I have my arm over the top of the camera, pushing down on that blade, trying to force it to dig in. And in fact, it does in a couple of places, but it's almost like I was sawing a piece of glass. It just kept skittering off. There's no doubt in my mind, this is not case hardened, but it appears to be hardened equally throughout the entire depth of the link itself. That's almost an entire minute, and when you take a look at this up close, I hardly did any damage at all. On the bolt cutter test, again, I clamped it up in the vise. I'm not really taking advantage of the vise, other than it keeps me from dropping the chain. My bolt cutters are 48-inch handles, and I am really giving it everything I've got here, just trying to force my way through that link. I felt nothing the entire time I was clamping down on this thing. I didn't feel any give or anything, to any indication I was cutting through it. And as you can see here, I barely did any damage at all with bolt cutters. On the die grinder test, I've actually tied this to my barbecue grill rather than my carbon fiber bicycle. You're going to see in a second that thing is really going to, when it snags, it kicks back, and I really didn't want to take a chance like that of it cutting through one of the tubes on my bike. The deeper you get in the chain, the more likely you are to have a kickback. It also destroys your disc. That disc on the die grinder started out brand new just less than 30 seconds ago as a 3-inch disc. The one on the ground is a 4-incher, but unfortunately my die grinder has a current limit, and it automatically shuts down when you try to drive a 4-inch disc through the chain. Here I'm struggling to get that thing positioned. It has to be tight so I don't get kickback, and also the link has to be aligned correctly. So this is exactly the kind of trouble people would have in the field. That's why I think this is probably a little bit more realistic. All right, it's lined up. I'm sorry it's out of frame, but with my now 2-inch disc, I'm going out the other side. It's still going to continue to kick back as it digs down into the link. I'll eventually get it here in a second, and you'll see it fall onto the ground. And now look at this disc. It is from a 3-inch down to a 1-inch. Horrible wear. All right, guys, you were looking at the remnants of what used to be a brand new OnGuard 8120 Mastiff chain lock. $60 off of either eBay or Amazon. Same price in both places. You see it had a pretty, well, in fact, a very resistant, I would say an excellent locking mechanism. This one actually still works. Still pops that baby out of there like a bad oyster. Couldn't break in there, no bypassing. Sawing through it with a hacksaw, failed. Trying to crop my way through it with a pair of bolt cutters, failed. The only thing that did work was the die grinder. Of course, that's going to work against anything, but it did last like a minute and a half. So for $60, I really don't think you're going to find a better level of security than the 8120 Mastiff. Anyway, that would be a recommended buy. So this it does still work, so I think we could probably give it away, but nobody would probably register. So instead of this, what I'm going to do, the giveaway this week, instead of that Mastiff that's going to go in the garbage, will be this guy. A brand new Mad Bob's Paragon pick set. All you got to do to win this is go to that website. In the middle of the page is a purple bar. Click it, register, and with a little bit of luck, next weekend you'll be the lucky owner of a very difficult to get Paragon kit. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time. Stay safe. Stay legal.